The following podcast was produced by Big Head Amusements for KQEK.com. With a background as a session and touring musician, composer, arranger, and producer Darius Holbert's been able to enter film composing with a substantial skill set, scoring short films, TV series, and documentaries. But perhaps his best-known work includes the beautiful Oh, the Places You'll Go, set to the flowing prose of Dr. Seuss, the Hulu series Quick Draw, and Hobo with a Shotgun, Jason Eisener's homage to Grindhouse Charnel.
How did you get involved with film music? Because you come from a really diverse background that has a lot of different styles of music.
I wrote a lot of music when I was coming up when I was younger. I did a lot of composition and a lot of competitions and had some stuff published and went on to do a composition degree too in college. All the meantime I was kind of playing in honky tonks in Texas and rock bands and producing hip hop and stuff. So when I moved to LA, I was really getting more into doing the touring and the session work and the artist development and production and things. And then I kind of gradually got a little tired of it. And I feel like it was almost coming full circle because I get back to sort of the composition side of things. And eventually ended up quitting all of the other production stuff and all the other kind of touring. And, I got a little older during the young man's game. I got married and had a kid, and I figured that my studio was working well as far as composition stuff was concerned. So I got more into film and television stuff by working with a couple of composers in LA, and just kind of throwing my hat in the ring and seeing who would take me on as far as being able. So yeah, it felt like kind of coming home, like it was kind of a circular journey.
Well, your years as a session musician, did you find that really helps you in terms of both your composition and relating to the musicians that you work with?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think that, my advice to all young musicians is always get out and play as much as you possibly can with different people, because invariably you'll get, a lot of great different perspectives. And it's the one thing that you really can't learn anywhere else besides sort of on-the-job training, is just how to listen and how to play with other people and how to, figure out exactly what you do best and how you fit within an ensemble or within any kind of group that you might be playing with, and then you'll pick up things from other people. And I would imagine that playing with a bunch of different people informed tremendously as far as the musical side of things, the musicality of things. Definitely informed my writing and my kind of band leading and orchestrating and conducting and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
How other people operate. Yeah.
Did you find that it was like a worthy change going from working with a lot of people to sort of just the quietness of being on your own, coming up with ideas, working them through, and doing it at a very different pace as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is definitely a big sea change when it comes from, essentially if you're a touring session guy, you're working days and then long nights, and then especially when you're out on the road and stuff, and you're always around people and always kind of thrust into those situations, especially, when you're in a bus or traveling with a plane a lot, always constantly around people, to going to shifting way, way down, and essentially it's me and my assistants, and sometimes usually just me writing in the studio all day. It's definitely quiet, and it's a solitary pursuit, but there's something also that's kind of better about that in many respects. I mean, aside from the obvious kind of distractions that you might avoid by being alone and not having to deal with other people, there's something that's kind of almost meditative about being able to get by yourself and focus solely on exactly what you want to get across, and then unleash it after it's done. I mean, you don't get the immediacy of playing live, of course. The immediacy of playing live, naturally, you get the automatic audience feedback and the people that are playing with you and all that other stuff. But it's kind of cool because you get to shape your sound. You get to shape exactly what you're working on. You get to be able to really dig deep into the presentation of the thing so that you can get it perfect. And you don't have to, it's not a temporal thing. It's much more of a permanent thing, which I think the solitary aspect of it really kind of helps drive.
There's three particular things that I'd like to hit upon. But the first one is the places you go, which I guess is I don't know. Like you've done feature films, short films, and TV shows, but I wonder if this particular short has perhaps gotten you more attention because it's kind of unique and it's very special.
Yeah, that piece has really resonated with a lot of people. I don't even remember exactly how I got hooked up with the director. I don't know if you've watched it. It was the Dr. Seuss book, but told by the people of the Burning Man Festival. And I had never had any interest in going out to Burning Man. It seemed a little loony to me. But it was a really fascinating way to present kind of a tried and true great piece of children's literature to these folks. And it was really touching. And I think the score really worked really well with it. People have really, really responded a lot to it. I still get emails all the time from folks all around the world saying how much it meant to them and how much that it was really moving to them and stuff. So I'm really flattered by the attention that it's gotten. But yeah, it's an odd medium, just kind of the solitary YouTube video that disappears and then it's not broadcast or anything. People have to kind of find it. But it has been interesting to see how resonant the piece has been with so many people. It's been great.
I just wonder from your perspective if you find that there's a difference now between the way that, if not people respond, the way that people discover sort of one's music through YouTube and other internet venues versus more traditional venues, because all it takes is just someone to simply click in a link and saying, go here and look at this, and then it just keeps getting forwarded and forward, which is so much more powerful, I think, than word of mouth used to be.
Absolutely. Well, it's a lot more, it's sort of the grassroots approach for any kind of, viral medium that goes around. I think that there's a certain immediacy even to the people that are making the product as well that we haven't had in the past. When film or TV music would be presented, you had no idea, number one, that who was writing the music, and it was really difficult to get in touch with them. But when you can click through to not only to see the piece or the project that's been presented on YouTube, but you can continue to click and then do more research about the filmmaker and the composer and the whoever worked on the thing, and then approach them immediately as well, because invariably there's some sort of online presence for every one of those different positions. So yeah, it's interesting because, and I think it kind of lends itself to a project that like that, Places You'll Go, because there is sort of a intimate portrait and a very visceral, one-on-one interaction between watcher and maker. And so it kind of lends itself more to that, grassroots approach that we're talking about.
I think what I really enjoyed about the music is that it's as playful as Dr. Seuss's prose, but at the same time there's kind of a slightly somber quality to it as well. It's as though that Seuss is kind of sort of challenging people, find your dreams, and the music is also kind of doing the same, kind of mimicking the way that the prose says, once in a while you might have a down period, but you have to pick yourself up. And I like the way that the music does that. And I wonder if that's one of the reasons why people also responded so well to the score.
I think so. Yeah, there's absolutely a sort of there's a melancholy aspect to it too. And I think I tried to get that to come across in the music as well. That it wasn't completely, because you could have done the sort of the overly joyous, fantabulous Dr. Seussian kind of, what people typically think of. But there is absolutely a touch of I don't know if it's necessarily sadness, but it's kind of melancholy, and that not everything is great. Like you said, you got to find your own path. I think it's a great message, and I'll forever like anything that the old good doctor has to say.
And then I wonder if we can move over to Hobo with a Shotgun, because it's a really, really different film just because of what it is. It's so reverent in kind of movies that the filmmakers embrace, the 80s action films, the exploitation films, and so on. And then for yourself, how did you become involved with that project, and how did you come across the sound for that? Because I guess the directors must have given you certain specific directions in terms of, we want it to be from this period, but maybe a bit more balanced for contemporary audiences.
Sure, yeah. The way I got involved in that project, it was kind of funny. I can't exactly remember how they found me, but it's this group of these Canadian kids that have been making movies all their growing up lives, and had been, each one of them sort of has a different role. Like, one is always the director, one's always the producer, one's always the composer, and there's a DP, I think, too. And they're great. They're great guys. And they made a short film. They made a short film called Treevenge that they needed some big bombastic orchestral stuff. And so they hit me up about that, and they didn't have any money. They were just kind of doing it for fun. And they had actually won a Grindhouse competition to make a fake trailer for a movie that didn't exist, and they actually made a trailer called Hobo with a Shotgun. So they won that competition. It was the fake trailer was shown in front of I think it was a few Robert Rodriguez films, or it was Tarantino or something. But they with the money that they got from winning that competition, they made this short film called Treevenge, which is hilarious. You can see it online too. It's kind of brutal as well, as I imagine you'd expect from those guys, but it's all about Christmas trees taking revenge on the people for cutting them down. And so it's hilarious too. And so that was really fun to work on. I worked on it with those guys, and Jason Eisener is the director of all these films. And it's a lot of pastiche and homage, but he's also got a great idea about what he wants and how he wants to go about it and stuff. And it's really well done. So then, with the awards that they won and the acclaim that they got from Treevenge, it won a couple of things at Sundance and kind of tore up the festival circuit. They actually got enough interest to actually make Hobo with a Shotgun, the fake trailer that they had originally made. And so he asked me if I wanted to be involved, and I was like, hell yes. And Jason, like I said, has a very specific idea about how he wants the movie to be presented. So, when he wrote the thing, I mean, it was pretty much dead on. He had storyboarded it already in his mind, and he cut the thing himself to his own temp track. So he already had an idea of what he wanted, and since he was going for kind of that homage to the 70s and 80s kind of slasher picks, the kind of over-the-top campy stuff, he used a lot of the same score when he temped the original edit that I saw. When he temped the edit, it was a lot of like John Carpenter scores, and like had a bunch of Marauder stuff in there, and the kind of like the heavyweight early 80s synth stuff. So he definitely had a very, very strong idea about what he wanted. But he used a number of different composers on that one. I was the lead composer, but he had a few other folks that did kind of other different parts. And one of the guys that he grew up with is their composer, and this guy Adam, who's a really talented composer himself, and he did a lot of the synth stuff, kind of the heavy lifting on the synth end of things, and I did more kind of the orchestral stuff. But it was really fun to work on. And you're right, it is definitely throwback, but with sort of almost kind of a tongue-in-cheek, not necessarily parody, but with a little wink to current audiences. Or there's a lot of definite imagery that is directly relatable to stuff that he had relied on heavily when he was coming up with the idea for the film.
One of the things that might be difficult for some composers is that when they are approached by a director, especially a younger director who's going for an homage, they want some very specific kinds of imagery, and that's what they're going after visually anyways. And some of it might be incredibly violent and grotesque, and I wonder if for yourself, is there ever a certain point where it might be too much for you, in which case a project might be a bit difficult to tackle, or do you find that there's a way that you can distance yourself from it so that you can look at a scene's basic elements and still meet the demands of that scene?
With that film, it was so cartoonish that it never really fazed me very much. I don't know if I'm necessarily desensitized just because of the generation that I came up in, but I did tell my mother as soon as I spotted the thing, I said, "You will never see this movie." But I liked the film. I thought it was great, and because it is so cartoonish and over the top, it never got overwhelming to me. Because whenever you score a film, you got to watch the dang thing about 1 billion times, and it never got to that point. I will say, just to reference another film that I just recently finished, was the documentary called Trophy Kids, which just aired on HBO in December, and that actually got to me because the film it's a documentary about parents of sports children, kids that they're kind of, a lot of these parents are kind of reliving their glory days through their kids, and there's a lot of flat-out abuse in the film, and I'm a fairly new parent, and so there were times when it got kind of too much to have to watch these guys like really physically and emotionally abuse these children, and I had to kind of get up, walk away, work on something else, do things like that, because that was really, really tough. But with Hobo, I never got to that point.
And then, just out of curiosity, with some of the filmmakers that have a lot of fascination for the films from the late 70s, especially the 1980s, do you share any kind of an interest in the music of that period or the way that maybe electronics were used at that time? Because although it was partly due to economics where it became more feasible, I guess, to hire somebody who was adept at synthesizers to do an entire score, but perhaps the way that composers were able to kind of transcend the economic and physical limitations of the instrument itself and come up with something that was sometimes really inventive.
I think anybody who does anything like I do these days is heavily indebted to that group of composers that did do a lot of synth stuff, kind of the first wave, especially George Moroder and people like that, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing right now unless that technology had kind of been saddled and ridden hard into the future. I mean, if I just want to listen to a film score, I don't want to go back and listen to that stuff. I think a lot of it is kind of corny and outdated. There's kind of been also kind of a resurgence, especially with films like Hobo, that folks that kind of cut their teeth as children on films that were scored like that are really interested in kind of getting back to it. Kind of, the synth heavy, the big retro machine stuff is kind of coming back into the fore, which is cool.
And then the last credit I just want to focus on is QuickDraw, partly because it's Hulu's first foray into original programming.
Yeah, it was one of the first batch. I think they had maybe 4 or 5 other shows that they all picked up at the same time. But yeah, it was one of the very first shows that they picked up last year. And along with a few others, they've since kind of expanded their roster. I think they bought maybe 5 other shows, maybe even more. But everybody's kind of getting into the game with Amazon and Netflix, all doing original content.
For yourself, do you find that there's any significant differences between scoring a television project for a network, a cable station, and an internet provider, which is now venturing themselves into being a programmer?
I think the main difference as far as working with Hulu versus working with with different other studios when it comes to broadcast or cable is that it's still kind of the Wild West, and I guess that's pun intended with QuickDraw, since it is the Wild West. There's not so much heavy-handedness. I mean, one of the reasons that I tend to stay away from studio television and from network and cable and all that is because there's kind of a deeply entrenched, how do I put it? Deeply entrenched cadre, I guess, maybe, of people that are kind of just television people and that have been there forever and they have MBAs. And it's difficult to kind of get anything punched through that wall. They have a very specific idea of what they want, I guess is what I'm saying. Whereas, at least with my limited experience so far with some of the new online streaming content, is that there's not that kind of heavy-handedness. There's people are open to trying new things, and they want different platforms. They're more able to be more adventurous in letting creative choices get to the point where they're broadcast. So I think that's probably the biggest difference. But so far, yeah, my experience has been great. It's a lot smaller numbers of people that are kind of overseeing these things. When you work for a major network, you got to go through all of the production company, plus then you got to get into the studio and you got to deal with all the producers and line producers and all the way up to the studio head. And these people have to sign off on everything. Whereas, at least with this show, it's just been me working with the 2 producers of the show, and then Hulu will come back with a couple of notes here and there, but it's definitely not as draconian as it sometimes is in some of the bigger networks.
Then my next to last question is just, can you describe just the musical palette that you chose for QuickDraw, because it is a period series?
Yeah, it's actually, there are some funny stories with that. They when I got approached to do it, the producers, they definitely wanted to do kind of a little hat tipping to Ennio Morricone and the kind of spaghetti western style stuff, which I was definitely down with because I'm a big fan of that music. So I got to do a lot of like the big, reverby whip cracks and horse whinnies and things, and kind of a lot of men's choruses yelling and things like that. It was really fun. But one of the producers was especially hung up on this Jew's harp sample. Jew's harp is the instrument that you can hear in a lot of like old-timey westerns. It sounds like, it's kind of ubiquitous in a certain period of westerns. And it sounds corny, but whatever. She was really, really a huge fan of this very specific cue that she had found from somewhere. So I tried desperately to find in either New York or LA the local Jew's harp virtuoso, and there was none to be found. I posted on Craigslist, and I got flute players that are like, yeah, I think I can probably do that, but nobody could really was an excellent Jew's harpist. So I decided I was going to teach myself. So I bought a whole bunch of them, and I watched a lot of YouTube lessons and things like that I could muster. In a few days, I kind of taught myself to get okay at it. It's a fairly simple monophonic instrument. It's not that difficult, but so I sent the producers these clips that I had recorded, and I said, okay, well, is this what you're looking for? And they were like, well, it's close. And I kept trying to find different instruments. I would buy different instruments online, and I would try to figure it out, and they're like, no, it's not quite it. So finally I sent the clip that they had, that they loved so much, to 3 of the world's foremost Jew's harp experts. One was in Australia, one was in, I think, Vietnam or Thailand, and the other one was in Spokane, Washington. And 2 of them got back to me and said, oh, what you're looking for is this very specific Vietnamese Jew's harp called the Dan Moi. And, oh, by the way, it is Jew's harp. I know that a lot of people say jaw harp or mouth harp, but I was admonished many times over by all of these folks that it has nothing to do with Judaism, but that's just the name of it for one reason or another. Anyway, so I said, all right, well, somebody send me one of these things. So they sent me this Vietnamese Dan Moi. I bought one from the guy in Southeast Asia, and I sent it to them. And they're like, that's it. That's totally it. So we relied pretty heavily on that sound for a lot of the score. But other than that, yeah, I mean, it was a super blast to work on because it was a lot of really like derivative kind of Western stuff, and I'm a huge Western fan, so it was good to write. Definitely fun to stretch the old Western legs.
It's pretty amazing that years after the Spaghetti Western's first debut, Morricone's music is still, in many ways, the standard.
Yeah, absolutely. And he says, it's funny, too, to hear him talk about, like, The Bad and the Ugly and stuff, and how he hated that score, and how talk about iconic. It's incredible, all the super reverb, tremolo guitar stuff, and he said that they were just kind of messing around. He never really liked it, but yeah.
I think he said that one of the first ones that he did, A Fistful of Dollars, he never liked. He thought it was one of his lesser scores, but it's really fun, and it has this great whistling motif, and it's really addictive.
Yeah, that's what everybody, I mean, even if you're messing around in the street as a kid and you're playing like Gunfight, you're going to whistle the same thing.
And then my last question is just, will there be a soundtrack album to Quick Draw? Because I know that it's not often that soundtracks to TV shows come out, especially those that are produced for the internet.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I don't think it's ever been actually broached, but that's not a bad idea because it was a lot of fun music to put together, and we worked really hard at it, and I think it came out pretty good. So we'll see. I just actually, as a little, what do you call it, a spoiler, I actually made my TV acting debut last week on the set of Quick Draw. I got shot in the chest. I'm very excited. So in season 2, you'll be able to see me die on screen. But as far as the soundtrack goes, I'll talk to the producers and we'll see if we can get something together because there's a lot of fun music that went on in that one for sure.
Visit DariusHolbert.com for media samples and news of upcoming soundtrack releases. For reviews, further interviews, and additional information, please visit KQEK.com. For podcasting services, including editing and mixing, please visit the Multimedia Skills section at mondomark.com for further information plus media samples. This program is copyrighted 2014 by Mark R. Hassan.